Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia Daf Kufyu Gimel. I'll remind everybody that our Shiur is taking place next Wednesday evening, or evening for us in Israel, 8:30 p.m., whatever time that is by you. We hope to see you all there by Zoom. And please register to get your own unique Zoom link. Everyone just takes about a second to register. All you need is your name and your email address, and you will receive a link by email. If you didn't receive an email right away, then you should just check your spam. It's probably there. Okay, looking forward to seeing you all there. Gefik went up yesterday about this very interesting topic that we finished up with yesterday, or we're finishing up with today, really, about this oath that the Sachir Bizmano Nishba Benotel. Basically, we have an argument between a person who claims they never got paid and the person who claims already paid you. Again, this is for salary purposes. Then, since we're concerned that the owner or the employer has too many workers to deal with or is too busy focused on his business, therefore may not remember and think and really believe that he or she paid the worker. Therefore, instead of the typical, they should take an oath and just not have to pay, we flip the oath, give it to the other side, and they pay so as to get there, and then can actually claim their salary. It's a very unique kind of halacha here, and there's a lot of complications of it as we ended yesterday, and all of a sudden kind of flipped it on its side and said, well, all of a sudden, once the date passes, we then assume that already the employer is going to have remembered. In other words, we assume this is all, if there was an argument beforehand, right? Before the date came to pay. Once the date comes to pay, because there's this prohibition of delaying salary, all of a sudden at that point, we assume that the owner is going to know exactly, did they pay, did they not? They're going to take care of payment. And therefore, if an argument ensues beyond the date, then already we're going to believe the balabait, the employer, and the employer will not need to pay. It's a little bit confusing. There's a lot of things, a lot of open questions here, how this exactly works. We're going to continue a little bit along these lines, finish up today, but Gefet definitely is a more in-depth and really going into some of the deeper rooted problems within the sugya. Okay, our next topic we'll then get to very soon is going to be about collaterals. And I know Alana Stein-Hain told me that she's going to give a shiur this week in Din and Daf on that topic. She hasn't sent it yet, so it's not going to be up just yet, but it will go up. Stay tuned for it about collaterals. It's another very, very interesting topic. And as usual, a lot of different opinions among the Rishonim that we won't necessarily have time to delve into. That's what all the extra content on our site is for. So with that, we'll get started where we're up to. So we basically just said that once the time comes, we assume the owner will remember because there's this looming prohibition and people don't like to go against prohibitions. Therefore, we assume that on the day the owner was supposed to pay, the owner must have paid. And therefore, if the argument ensues later, beyond that date, we assume that the owner paid. So the Gemara asks, we're on line number 2 of Daf Kufyu Gimel, V'chi Sachir over Mishum Bal Tigzol. But along those same lines, if we don't think that people transgress Torah prohibitions, well then, shouldn't you say that the worker is not going to be over on Bal Tigzol, on stealing? Okay, there's prohibition to steal. So of course, you're not going to do this prohibition of stealing. And if they basically lie and say, I already got paid, well, that doesn't make any sense because they're stealing. So we have now, well, this one is believed because they're not going to go against Baal Talim, pushing off salary. But the other one should be believed because they're not going to be they're not going to transgress the prohibition about stealing. I'm just going to stop for a second because in all the introductions, I forgot the dedication, which is a very nice, beautiful dedication and a month dedication. So here goes. This month's learning is sponsored by Rabbi Chaim Herring with pride and love in honor of his spouse, Terry Kravosha, who received this year's Sidney Barrows Lifetime Commitment Award from the Minneapolis and St. Paul Federations in recognition of her distinguished contribution to the Twin Cities legal and Jewish communities. Mazel tov to you, Terry, and mazel tov on your upcoming aliyah. Okay. So back to our topic. We have theft on the, he's not gonna steal, or she's not gonna steal the worker, and the employer is not gonna lie about not gonna push off paying salary. So now it doesn't make any sense that we're gonna side on the side of the balabait and not on the side of the employer and not on the side of the worker. To which the Gemara answers, and the classic Gemara answer, well, it's 2 against 1. We have 2 things working in favor of the owner and only 1 thing working in favor of the worker. Gabe balabayit, I call him the owner because that's how you literally translate balabayit, even though it's employer. Gabe balabayit, when it comes to the employer, ikatrei chazake. What are they? Chada de'en balabayit over mishum baltalin. Again, we assume on payday, the person paid the salaries. Why? Because number 1, baltalin. We assume people take that very seriously and are going to make sure not to do that. V'chada, well, even if the person's not motivated enough to remember, de'en sachir mashes chavo. Anyone who's supposed to get their salary and doesn't get paid on the day they're supposed to get paid is going to go to their employer and say, hey, pay up. And therefore, the assumption is, whether it's because they were worried about baltalin or whether it's because there's 2 things that are basically going to push us in the direction that probably the salary was paid on time. But to say that we assume people aren't going to transgress, don't steal, and therefore the worker is probably not lying because otherwise they'd be stealing by taking double salary when they're only supposed to get salary once, well, that's only 1 thing working in their favor. And therefore, we're going to side this time on the side of the balabayit. I wonder why the Gemara didn't raise the issue of hamutzim mechaveo ala paraya here also. It's another reason if we have 2 even, let's say it wasn't 2 chazakas, I guess they just had a better answer or another answer. But theoretically, you also could have said, well, we just maintain the status quo. The status quo is you don't have to take money out of pocket. That's another reason. Now that we're going to go back and finish up the sugya by going to the very last part of the Mishna, of this section of the Mishna, which was Im yesh edim shetavao, harei ze nishba b'notel. There's one exception to this rule. Once the date passes, we believe the employer. But if the worker brings witnesses that he tried to get the salary and the person didn't pay them, then we side with the worker. To which the Gemara first assumes that this means, okay, let's take an example. The day for paying was Sunday. Let's say the person worked Saturday night. All day Sunday was the day to pay, because remember, you can't leave it till sunset if you're a night worker. And then we're like on Wednesday, let's say. So if Wednesday, the worker says, hey, you didn't pay me. And then if on Monday, the Gemara thinks that this is the way the Mishnah reads, if on Monday, after the day of payment passed, the workers, if on Wednesday, the worker says, hey, I can bring witnesses and on Monday I tried to claim my salary and didn't get it. Well, then we side with the worker, to which the Gemara says, I don't get it. Ha katava le kaman. I'm reading a little differently based on the box reading. What does it help if on Wednesday he's claiming, making a claim, and normally if he just makes a claim, we're going to believe the employer. So what's the difference if he makes the claim, also made the claim on Monday? Monday was also after the date. In other words, if we're going now and saying normally you make a claim after the date, you're not believed. So what does it help if he made a claim on Monday, also after the date of the salary? If he's not going to be believed now, why would he be believed if he says, oh, I also made a claim earlier? To which the Gemara says, Amar Rav Asi, he answers, Shetva o bismano. We're not talking about that today's Wednesday and he made a claim on Monday. Let's say today's Monday, or maybe Wednesday, although soon we'll see it's only the only Monday. Let's say today's Monday, and let's say, right, the worker says, hey, you didn't pay me. Normally, we wouldn't believe him because it's past the date. But if the worker can say, hey, but I have proof that on Sunday, I was trying to get you to pay me and you didn't pay me, and I have witnesses who can attest to that, then that weakens the whole claim of you must have paid him on time, right? Then it works. Okay, and that's the only way to understand this, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But then they say, okay, wait. So on Monday, let's assume Monday, comes the worker, okay, let's call her Naomi. Naomi goes to Ruth, who is her employer, and says, hey, you didn't pay me. Now it's after the date. We should believe Naomi. We should believe Ruth, sorry. Naomi was the worker. Naomi comes to Ruth and say, hey, pay me. And Ruth says, I paid you already. And then we believe Ruth and she doesn't have to pay. But if Naomi says, I have witnesses that showed that on Sunday morning, I tried to get you to pay me and you didn't pay me, then we'll side with Naomi. But Dilma Labatar Hachi Para. If the witnesses were in the morning, who's to say Ruth didn't pay her in the afternoon? It doesn't prove anything. So Amar Abaya Shetva'o Kozmanu. Naomi would have to bring proof that she tried to get Ruth to pay her all day long and Ruth didn't pay her. If she can prove that, then we'll believe her. Anything short of that, it won't work. Ula Olam. Now we say, okay. So if Ruth comes on Monday, Naomi comes on Monday. Apologies for getting confused. Naomi comes on Monday and says, hey, I have proof that Ruth, I tried to get you to pay me all day Sunday. It didn't work. So we'll believe Naomi in that case, as opposed to normally we believe Ruth. We'll believe her. But what? What if Naomi comes a month later and says, hey, I can prove that on Sunday, back when a month ago, on payday, you didn't pay me. Can she still claim? And you haven't paid me since then? How far does this extend? To which Amar Rav Chama bar Ukva keneged oto yom shel tviyah. It's only Monday. And that's why I switched the case from Wednesday to Monday. Only the day after. Is that, again, let's just do a summary. When Naomi, the worker, comes after the salary date, we already side with the employer, with Ruth. But unless she can prove, Naomi can prove, that all day long Sunday she was trying to get her salary, or maybe even just close to the end of the day, right? And the witnesses see that Ruth is unwilling to pay her, then she has a case, but she can only use that case to support herself for a day. After a day, that won't help her either. And then we'll go back to siding and assume that Ruth took care of payment. That ends that section. Now we're going to start on collaterals. And there's a bunch of different types of collaterals. I'll talk about two, and basically we'll go with the interpretation that the Mishna is really only referring to one type, and the Gemara in general is only referring to one type, although there is a bit of a debate among the Rishonim whether everything we're discussing today is that one type. But we have a collateral that someone borrows money and they give a collateral as a guarantee for the loan. Okay, that's one type of collateral. We have a collateral, well, mashkanta desura, right, where you deduct all the time. And then we have a different type of collateral, and that's the collateral we're going to talk about here, which is, comes the day to pay, okay? So they're supposed to pay. They don't pay. What happens? Well, then you can take collateral. And what's the point of that collateral? Well, the point of that collateral is to guarantee payment of the loan. And if the loan doesn't get paid, then the creditor is going to basically keep that item for themselves. Okay, ultimately. That's the idea of this collateral. This collateral is coming when already the borrower or debtor is not paying, when they're supposed to pay. So it comes the date to pay, they don't pay, then you can take a collateral. Now, the Torah, and that's what we're assuming these psukim in the Torah are talking about, the Torah has a whole section in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 24, and also in Sefer Shmuel, chapter 22, I believe it is. Yeah, chapter 22, about rules about how you can seize the collateral, what type of collateral you can seize. It basically breaks up into number one. It says in Sefer Dvarim, Ki tashe b're'echa mashat me'uma, this is in Dvarim, chapter 24, verse 10, Lo tavo el beito la'avot avoto. You have to treat the person properly. You can't go into their house and grab a collateral. Okay, what should you do instead? Bachutz ta'amod, stand outside. You have to keep the person, let them have some self-respect. Don't walk into their house, seize an item, wait outside, let them bring you some. Okay, that's number one. Then there's all sorts of things that you can't seize. Like, for example, if it's a widow, you can't take clothing. If it's you can't take rechayim varechev. You can't take basic things that are needed in their house, like their millstone, to make their flour. Otherwise, right, they didn't buy flour made or pre-ready like we do. Basic food needs, you have to leave them with. There are all the rules. If you take something they need at night, you have to return it at night, right? If they're poor, you can't leave them without their basic needs. So there's a way of limiting what you can take and for how long you can take it. So now we're going to start discussing those rules. The Mishna. Now we get a new rule that we didn't discuss, which is when you lend money to someone, and again, we're assuming, and the time for the loan came up, it didn't pay you, when you go to limashkenenu, to seize a collateral, to be able to protect your rights as the lender, you can only do it by the court. Now, the simple reading of this, okay, let's just read the next line. And you can't go into their house. So we're assuming, what does it mean, lemashken? It means to go into their house and take it. So what does it sound like the Mishnah is saying? The simple reading, we're going to have 3 readings of this Mishnah. Right now, we're going to assume the simple reading of the Mishnah is, you can't go into the house. That pasuk is for the individual, but an agent of the court can do it for you. Okay, and that's the way to do it. It's not appropriate that the creditor come in. That's humiliating. But if a messenger of the court goes to do it, they can go into the house. And the lo yikanes lebeito is talking about, and it's the first part of this thing is saying, you can't, but the court can. And then it says, and what can't you do? You can't go into the house. But again, an agent of the court could. If you have 2 of one item, so you're allowed to seize one of them, but leave them with the other, because again, you can't take away their basic needs. If it's something they use at night, like their pillow to sleep on, make sure to return it. Again, assuming they're poor. If they're rich and they have plenty of pillows, so you don't need to. But if you took something they need, return the pillow at night. If you take the plowshare that they use for plowing, return it for use during the day. So you keep it at night, you return it during the day. But we're going to learn, and this in other ways as well, this whole thing, and by the way, the pasuk says, if you remember, this will be considered a righteous deed of yours. So within this whole thing about you're a creditor and you're owed money and you have all the rights to get your money back, but you have to treat the person like a human being. You have to be, and maybe even beyond the letter of the law. So even though you should be able to get a collateral, you can't go into their house, it's humiliating. You also, right, have to give them back their items. But this responsibility to be generous and nice and all that is only between you and the borrower, not between any other household members. So we're going to see this in another way as well later on. But that means that if this person dies, now you already collected you keep the collateral. You don't have any responsibility, even though you think, right, the kids were dependent on the father's dead. You don't have any responsibility to return it to the orphans. Okay, and now you just get your money back because you have the collateral in hand. By the way, this is one of the reasons people took collaterals, because if you have a loan out, the person doesn't pay you, and then they die, it's going to be much harder to collect it from orphans. Remember, there's all sorts of rules. You can only collect from land. Let's say they didn't have land, and you can't get from the movables of the orphans inherited. You have to take an oath. It's very complicated. So people would take a collateral, and then if the person died, right, they took a collateral so that if the person died, they'd at least have something in hand and they'd be able to keep it and get their loan back very easily. So there's no responsibility to return it to the orphans. Rashba Gomer, now Tanakama doesn't agree with this, and we'll get back to this at the end of the daf. Rashba says, even to the person himself, the borrower, this whole law about returning it at night, during the day, depending on what it is, that's only for the first 30 days. After the court rules that this person needs to pay and didn't pay, and you get to seize a collateral, after 30 days, you just sell it and you get the money and done. Okay, so what Rashbag says, and we're going to see this at the end of the daf, Rashbag views all these laws of collateral for 30 days. Once it becomes beyond 30 days, it leaves the laws of collateral. So all those rules about returning it and all that are no longer relevant, because that collateral after 30 days, it's like, Cinderella turns into a whatever at midnight. At 30 days, it becomes it's just a payment. It turns into a payment of the loan, repayment of the loan, and that's it. It's just valued at money. It's not a collateral anymore. It leaves the world of collateral, turns into something else. So that same item is now something else. And then all the laws of collateral don't apply. So that's Rabban Shimon. Not everybody, Tanakama doesn't agree. Tanakama never says you're allowed to just sell it and be done with it. No. For all the days you have this as collateral until they pay you back, you return it every night or whatever, right? Whatever rules are applicable. So we'll come back to him later. We're going to start with Shmuel in the Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Shliach beitin menatech nituchein aval mashkone lo. Shmuel says a shliach beitin can do nituach. We'll talk about what this is in a minute, but can't do mashkune. Okay, this sounds like a little gibberish. What does this mean? Mashkune means coming into your house. Now, we thought in the Mishnah said, you can't come into the house and take it if you were owed the money, but an agent of the court can. Shmuel says, no. No one can come into the house. That pasuk, don't go into their house, is for everybody. It's humiliating as well if an agent of the court comes into your house, right? Your house could be a mess, your house, right? It's embarrassing. That we don't do. What can the Shliach Beit Din do that you can't do? Shliach Beit Din, if he meets the guy on the street in the marketplace, he can seize an item of his. That's what the court can do. No, but they can't go into the house. They can get you outside. You know, the loven. So the Gemara says, they're playing on the word mashkenenu. Mashkenenu, right? Nituch means seize it outside. Mashkune means take it from their house. So it sounds like the Beit Din though can do a mashkon. It says you can't, as the malveh, as the creditor, you can't take a mashkon from the house, but someone else can. Who's that? The agent of the court. So Shmuel says, I'll tell you how to read the Mishnah. When it says yimashkenenu, it doesn't really mean yimashkenenu. It means take a mashkon outside the house. So you can't take a mashkon in the shuk, but the court agent can. Hachinami mistabra, and I'll further prove it because the Mishnah reads a little weird according to your interpretation. Shmuel says you're reading because the katani seifa lo yikanes lebeito litomashkono mani. That sentence doesn't make any sense. After it already said you can't take a mashkon, if we assume that means you can't go into the house, except the court can, which is the way we originally read it. Well, then why would it then say lo yikanes lebeito and don't go into the house, which is talking to the creditor? We already just said that in lo yimashkenenu ela bebeitin, so it would be totally repetitive, right? Mani, who is that referring to? Don't go into the house. Ilam a Baal Chov, if you want to say against me, Shmuel says that it's the Baal Chov. Mereisha shma minan. We already learned that from the first line. And therefore, it must be el halav. That line must be referring to Shliach Beit Din. Okay, so again, two ways to read the Mishnah. One is the first way we read it. Don't take a mashkon. Only the agent of the court can do that. And lo yikanes lebeito is referring to the creditor. The creditor can't go into the house, but the Beit Din can go into the house. Shmuel says that's totally redundant. The next line is unnecessary because you already said don't go into the house in the first line. So Shmuel reads it as lo yimashkenenu really means don't grab it in the shuk. Only the court agent can grab it in the shuk. And furthermore, nobody can go into the house. Not the creditor, not the agent of the court. So the Gemara says, no, I get it, Shmuel, that you think the first way we read it is a little redundant. Okay, so we'll read it a different way. That goes against you. How's that? And here's a third reading of the Mishnah. Imishum halu iriya, you can't prove from the language of the Mishnah that you're right, Shmuel, because hachi kamar, you could read it like this. Hamavet chavero lo yimashkenenu ela bebeitim, which means you can't go into the house, only the court can. I'm sorry, right. Michlal de bebeitim imashkenim, but the court can't go into the house. Okay, now, what do you do with the next line? Well, you can't go into the house. We already just said that. So now they're going to read the second line a little differently. Baal Chov, it is talking about the Baal Chov and not about the Shliach Beit Din, which is what Shmuel said. Baal Chov, the creditor, afilu nituche nami lo, can't, it didn't say anything about nituche here, but when it says don't go into the house, what it really means is you can't seize it in the shuk as the creditor, even though the court can, that's right. The court can seize it in the shuk, the court can go into their house. You are on the other extreme. You can't do either of those. Now, why can't you seize it in the shuk? It's not what it says in the Torah. The Torah just says you can't go into their house. Well, it's what we call gadil. We put an extra precaution up. We say, we don't even let the creditor seize it in the shuk, because if we let you seize it in the shuk, you might think that you could go into the house. And that's why it says, lo yikanes lebeito, don't go into the house. It means on account of the fact that you can't go into the house, you therefore can't also seize it in the shuk. Obviously, it doesn't say those words in the Mishnah, but that's an alternative possible reading of the Mishnah. And it would be, it's missing a few words and maybe the more important words, but that's another way to read the Mishnah. So we have 3 possible ways to read the Mishnah. Now, since 3 is our number, we're now going to have 3 difficulties against Shmuel. First 2 will resolve. The second will resolve in a bit of a different manner. Mativ Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef comes and says, okay, wait. We have this pasuk, lo yachvol rechaim v'rechev, which means, lachvol means to seize a collateral. Don't take rechaim v'rechev, which is the millstone. Hadvarim achirim chavol. Well, this seems to imply you can't take items they need for eating for basic food needs, but you can take other things. Now, what does it mean to take other things? Doesn't it mean go into their house and take them? Okay. Lo tachvol beged almana. Don't seize the clothing of the widow. Hashal achirim tachvol. Don't take, right? You have to treat widows with extra, right? They have less money than other people. They're usually, again, not all widows are poor, but most widows in those days especially were poor because no one was supporting them. So what does it seem to imply? Though you could take clothes of others. Now, man, who is this referring to? If it's the Baal Chov, the creditor, who we're saying, don't take the millstone, but take other things. Don't take the beged of a widow, but you could take the beged of other people. Well, we already, what does it mean to seize? To seize means go into their house. We already know you're not allowed to go into their house. So it can't be referring to that. It must be talking to the shliach beitin. And it's saying, even though you can go into the house, be careful what you take. You can't take everything. You can't take everything from everyone. Depends who the person is, depends what the item is. And then it sounds like the shliach beitin can go into the house. Just when they go into the house, they have to be limited in what they could take or who they could take from. And then that would go against Shmuel, who said, no, the agent can't go into the house. So to respond to this difficulty, Tirgama Rav Papa braita Rav Nachman came to Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef was the one who questioned this. So Rav Papa, the son of Rav Nachman, explained in front of Rav Yosef. Rav Papa braita Rav Yosef came to Rav Yosef. Some people say it was his son, Rav Papa, the son of Rav Yosef, who explained to Rav Yosef. La'olam beBaal Chov. This really means the Baal Chov. So how do you explain? Well, it's already forbidden to go into the house. So of course you can't go into the house to take a millstone, right? And that seems to imply you could come into. What does it mean? Well, lavor alav b'shnei lavim. What it means is, number 1, you can't go into their house. You go into their house, you get lashes. Number 2, if you went to their house and seized their millstone, which is worse than just seizing anything, right? Then you get 2 sets of lashes. Okay? So it doesn't mean what we thought, which is, well, you're allowed to go into the house to seize other things, just don't seize that. No, that's not what it means. Okay, it just means you're not allowed to do that, and you're not allowed to do that, and it could be referring to the Baal Chov, and then Shmuel has no problem because the agent of the court is allowed to go into the house. Tashma, second source to raise the difficulty with Shmuel. Mimash v'shenemar b'chutz ta'amod eini yodea sha'isha asher atanu shebo yotzi ela mata mulomar b'ha'ish. They're worried about this word b'ha'ish. The pasuk says, stand outside, and the person who you are trying to get money from, no shebo, they should bring it outside. Now, what's bothering them is, first of all, if you're standing outside, obviously then they'll bring it to you outside. You don't need the whole second part of the pasuk, and you don't need to talk about this ish. Who's this ish? So the way they're going to darshan this is that there's 3 people in the verse. It's you, the creditor, it's the borrower, and it's the shliach beitin. This ish is some other ish. Now, this certainly isn't the simple reading of the pasuk, because the simple reading of the pasuk is you stand outside, and the other person, there's only one other person who's the debtor, the borrower, right? Basically will bring it to you outside. But this is the world of drasha. And the fact that they add this word vaha'ish comes to tell us, oh, there's a third person we're talking about here. Now, what does this say? Well, l'rabot shliach beitin. This says, b'chutz ta'amod, and who's the ish? Well, the ish is both the person who you're taking it from, or alternatively, you stand outside, and the ish, the shliach beitin that went into the house, will bring you this item. Okay? And then what do you see? Shliach beitin can go into the house. So that seems pretty clear. To which, right? They say now, right? My love shliach beitin kilove. It sounds like if you say the ish is the shliach beitin, and in the verse, okay, if you talk about where would you put a comma in that pasuk, you would say, b'chutz ta'amod, stand outside, break, and the person who you're trying to get the money from will bring the item to you outside. And then the person is on the side of the loved, they're like the borrower, meaning they can go into the house. That goes against Shmuel, to which the Gemara says, "Lo, shliach beitin kemalveh." No, you can read it differently. Now, in the world of drasha, you're allowed to do this, not in the simple reading of the verse, but you can read the pasuk as move the comma over. Bachutz ta'amod v'ha'ish. Who has to stand outside? You and the person and the agent of the court. The agent of the court is like you, has to stand outside, and that's how Shmuel can explain this. So the extra ish is coming to put the ish on the side of the creditor. Third source, which I told you we're not going to be able to resolve so easily. Tashma. Now we're moving to a pasuk from Shemot. If you take something of your friends, ad bo hashemesh tishivenu lo. Make sure to return it before the sun sets. B'shliach beitin hakatuv medaber. This pasuk is talking about the shliach beitin. Now again, what's it saying? If you seize the property, chavol means you go into the house and you seize the property. So now they're going to say, why are we assuming this is talking about the shliach beitin? Right? Maybe it's talking about the creditor. Well, obviously it can't be talking about the Baal Chov because it seems to imply you can go into the house and seize their item. And we already know that the Baal Chov can't because it says in Dvarim the Baal Chov can't. Because Yomi lo tavo beito lavot avoto harei Baal Chov amur. That's the Baal Chov can't go into the house. So again, if you take clothing and it's clothing they need at night, then you have to return it by the end of the day. So that must be b'shliach beitin hakatuv medaber. Now this source very clearly says the person who can't go into the house is the creditor. And it's very clear that the shliach beitin is allowed to go into the house, and it's super clear cut here. There's no other way to read it. So the only solution to this is to say tannaitic. Shmuel says, oh, that source doesn't bother me because it's a tannaitic debate. And now he's going to prove that it's a tannaitic debate because it's going to bring two braita that show both opinions. And then it's going to be clear this is a debate among Tannaim, and Shmuel's just saying, don't bother me with that source because that source I don't hold by. I hold by a different one. Here are the two sources. Ditanya, shliach beitin shabala mashkano lo yikanes lebeito lemashkano ela omein bi bachutz v'ala motzi lo mashkon shenemar bachutz ta'amod v'ha'ish. This is exactly the resolution. This is a braita that proves how we resolve that second difficulty, which is we read the pasuk as stand outside and the person. Meaning, who's the person? The shliach beitin also has to stand outside, and it says it explicitly in this braita. The shliach beitin that comes to take collateral can't go into the house. Okay, there you have it. That's Shmuel. Shmuel holds by that braita, and here's a different braita. Tanya idach bal chov shabal mashkano lo yikanes beito lemashkano. A creditor who tries to get their money back can't go into the house. Ela omei bachutz v'hala nichnasu motzi lo mashkano shenemar bachutz ta'amod. You have to stand outside, and the person brings it to them outside. And there's the other opinion. But the shliach beitin can go into the house, no problem. Below, okay, now, that's basically the end. Okay, we finished that sugya. We had Shmuel, who basically stands in opposition to the way we read the simple reading of the Mishna. It says, no, it doesn't mean the beitin can go into your house. No, the beitin can seize it in the court, in the shuk, but even the shliach beitin can't go into the house. We brought three difficulties. In the end, we said, well, it's a machloket tanaim. But since we brought this Mishna, this braita, the second braita, we're now going to read the end of that braita, and we're going to go in depth into some other elements that come up, which are all related to our topic. So it's kind of off topic, but on topic. In other words, it's off topic because we started with Shmuel. From there, we got into this braita. From this braita, we're going to get off on other things, but it's all things related to the same idea about how to treat this person that you're taking the collateral from. As we talked before, you can't take the rechaim v'rechev, this is learned from, you can't take basic food items for them. This is like ochal nefesh we have by Yom Tov, right? You can cook things that you need for your basic foods. Here also, you can't take basic items they need for food. V'noten mita umita umatzah la'ashil. You leave two beds and a cover for the rich person. Umita umita umapatz la'ani. If he's poor, he doesn't really have this nice blanket cover or something. He has like a wicker mat. You leave him with a mat, okay? Two beds and a mat. So two beds and a cover for the rich person, two beds and a mat for a poor person. You see that it depends who you are. We leave you with what your own needs are, as opposed to you might think you leave a poor person with more. No, You actually leave a rich person with more because it's humiliating for them to have to sleep, right? You don't want to humiliate the person. So everyone, as we say, lefi chodo, according to his rank. Avalo liishto v'lo lebanav v'libnotav. And as I said before, all this niceness you're supposed to do is only for the person who's owing you the money, not for the wife, not for the sons, not for the daughters. Now you're obviously asking, what are the two beds for, if not for the man and his wife? So we'll get there soon. Don't worry. Last line of the braita, which is going to be the main line of the braita we're going to deal with. Just like we leave you with your basic needs, as the Baal Chov has to do that. Also in Erechim, we do the same thing. What is Erechim? We're in a totally different topic. If I commit the value of a person to the temple, it could be the value of myself, it could be the value of someone else. I commit the value of a person. There's rules in Vayikra that tell you exactly how much money, what value, what the amount you're supposed to give to the temple is. Then it says, but if you can't afford it, then the Kohen evaluates. There's a whole section that talks about the Kohen evaluates what you need. Let's say you're supposed to pay a certain amount, and you just don't have that. If you pay that, you'll have nothing to live on at home. So the Kohen evaluates your situation, what you need, your basic food needs and other needs, bed, things like that, and leaves you with that, and you only have to pay the difference. Okay, now they say just like we do it there, here we do it there also. So the Gemara says, wait, first question is klape laya. What do you mean? It's the opposite. Ikar sidur be'erchin ktiv. It says it in the Torah there. And it's all learned out by gezeira shava, because when it talks about a person paying back a loan, it says b'chia muchachicha. And the word mach, it's the same word, the same root. We learn gezeira shava from erchin to here, and that's where we get it from here. So they say, fine, it's just got flipped in the braita. It's the opposite. It means just like in erchin, we do an evaluation and we don't leave you with nothing. Likewise, here we do an evaluation, we don't leave you with nothing. Okay, the only difference there is there you actually become exempt. Here, once you do get the money, you have to pay the creditor, and that's because there's two people here. Anyway, that's a side point. Before we get to our main topic, now that we're going to deal with to the end of the daf, we have one side point, which is this two-bed thing. Amar, so quote from the braita. What's the second bed for? If it's for the wife and the son and the daughter, we already said you don't need to do for them. They're actually both beds for you. What do you need two beds for? I don't know. You guys have two beds in your house for yourself? What do you need two beds for? One was used for eating. Now you might remember this, right? And if you don't remember learning in the Gemara, certainly you know from the Manishtana, they would be misubin in those days. They would recline on these beds. So one is for the bed for eating, and one is the bed for sleeping. Why do you need a separate bed for eating and for sleeping? Well, Shmuel, okay, not because you don't want crumbs and animals in your bed. Okay, that might be a good reason. But no, we're going to bring Shmuel, who is a doctor, who said the following statement. Tamar Shmuel, I know how to cure everything except for the following three things. He doesn't really explain the diseases. He explained what causes these problems in people's bodies that I can't resolve these issues. Number one, someone who eats bitter dates on an empty stomach. Get this disease that I don't know how to cure. Manda asr mitna dikitana ritiva, a heart say. Someone who puts on a flax, wet, moist belt. Cause some disease or problems. And last, finally, manda achil nama v'lo maske arba garmidin. Someone who eats bread and doesn't walk 4 cubits. Meaning, they had 2 beds so that they didn't eat in bed and go fall asleep in bed. You need to move after you eat. At least you walk from one bed to the other. Okay, interesting. So, moving on. Tana kamed Rav Nachman. So now someone brings this braita. This is very common. People will quote braita in the yeshiva in front of Rav Nachman. It's part of the braita that we just saw. Amrle, he says to him, wait, something doesn't jive here. So Rav Nachman asked the question according to Rashbag. Rashbag in the Mishna said, after 30 days, we just sell the mashkon. So if we sell the mashkon, presumably it means we sell the entire mashkon and we don't leave you with basic needs as the borrower, right? You're stuck with nothing at this point. So how could you say in that same tone that Rashbag says you can just sell the whole thing? And here you say you have to leave the person with basics. Rashbag clearly doesn't think that. So Gemara says, why are you asking a question according to Rashbag? Go with Tanakama. Tanakama says you always have to return the pillow at night, the machresha during the day, the plowshare. Why do you have to go with Rashbag and ask a question? This braita could have been according to Tanakama, who doesn't think that you could just sell it. Because you can't just sell it because this belongs to the person and you have to return it every night so they're not left without their basic needs. So they say, no, Rav Nachman asked the question because Tana Kirashbag Tana Kameh. The Tana, again, it wasn't a Tana, but it's a guy who brings braita. He was living with Rav Nachman. He wasn't a Tana. But the guy who brought the braita said it in the name of Rashbag. They just didn't quote it right to us. He said it in Rashbag's name, and that's why Rav Nachman asked the question. And then Rashbag said to him, we're just going to repeat his question. I'm sorry, then Rav Nachman said to him, we're going to repeat his question. According to Rashbag, doesn't make any sense. If you can sell it after 30 days, then why do you have to make sure to leave the guy basics? Obviously, you can sell the whole thing and leave him with nothing. How do we know this? It's none. Because Rashbag Omer, and we're just repeating what we already know. So now we're going to say, right, that's after 30 days, you can sell it. So now we're going to suggest a possible answer and say there's no way it could be. Maybe when he said sell it didn't mean sell it completely. Sell it and take part of the money and leave the person with the basics, right? Maybe that's what he meant. In other words, let's say you had a fancy dress, so sell the dress, give the person some money to live on, and give him or her a cheaper dress to wear, and use the rest of the money to pay back the loan. Maybe that's Rashbag. So can't be. Okay, so let's read it. Maybe he means Dilma Hachi Kamar. Okay, up to 30 days. Again, this is a possible reading Rashbag. Up to 30 days, return it every day. After 30. Again, return, okay, we'll see in a minute a case of a pillow. You have a fancy pillow, so sell the pillow, give them a basic pillow, and use the money, keep the money for yourself, the rest of it. So, if you think Rashbag thinks that, no way, no how. Because there is no such thing as selling a nice pillow and giving a cheap pillow. Why? To Amar Abaye, Rashbag, Rabban Shimon, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Kiva, Kulus Viralu, Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim. In these other sugyo, we're going to see all these rabbis, including Rabban Shimon and Gamliel, holds that every Jew is treated as if they're the son of a king. Meaning that if you have this fancy pillow, I can't replace it with a cheap pillow. Because for you, even though maybe you could live with this cheaper pillow because you're not a son of a king, but we treat you like you're the son of a king. And therefore, if we said in Ashir has to be left with basic needs at his level and a poor person at their level, everybody's at the level of an Ashir according to Rashbag. You can never replace the fancy dress with the cheaper dress, the fancy pillow with the cheap pillow, because a fancy pillow is what's, rightfully everyone's deserving of a fancy pillow. Okay, how do we know that all these people hold this? So now we're going to get off and see all these sugyot where they basically say we treat people as if everyone's the son of kings. Rashbag, ditznam, lo taluf v'lo tachardal. Okay, you can't carry, this is carrying on Shabbat. I forgot what aluf is. Someone wants to give me the translation, and not mustard seed, because, okay, you can't carry them because they have no use without doing something to them. Okay, the chardal needs to be grinded. You can't grind things on Shabbat. The loof, I forget what it is. It needs some process done to it, an edible bean. It has to be cooked. Okay, you can't eat it unless you cook it. And you can't cook on Shabbat, so that makes it muktzah right now. Rashbag, matir b'loof, mipnei shel ma'achala orvim. Rashbag says, what do you mean? You can carry the loof because ravens eat those beans. Now, ravens were only owned by kings, but yet anyone can carry it because potentially anyone could be the son of a king. Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so that already proves our point, Rashbag. Rabbi Shimon titznam, b'nei melachim sachim shemen vered al gabei makoteim b'Shabbat, shekein dorkam lasuch b'chol. You can't do things for medicinal purposes. Why is that? Because you might come to grind spices. So anything for medicinal purposes is forbidden. But if you do it normally, not for medicinal reasons, then you're allowed to do it. So you're allowed to put this specific type of oil on your wounds on Shabbat because this is a type of oil that people put on If you're the son of a king or the daughter of a king, you put it on your body all the time. So they do it on a regular day, not for medicinal purposes. So you could claim it's not medicinal purposes because everybody's considered son or daughters of kings. Rabbi Shimon Omer, right? So that, sorry. I didn't read the whole thing. According to Tanakama, only the sons of kings can do this. Rabbi Shimon, who was our one, right? There was a whole list of all the people. Omer, Kol Yisrael b'nei melachim. Everyone is considered the son of a king. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva Detanya. Haresha yunoshim bo elef zuz v'lavush itztala ba mea maneh. Okay, here's the case I brought before. You owed 1,000 zuz, but you were wearing a beautiful cloak that was worth 10,000 zuz. Mafshitino tamimenu umalbishimoto itzla ruyalo. We take it off, we sell it. It's crazy that you owe all this money, you won't pay it back when you have this fancy thing that's worth 10 times the amount. No, we make you sell it. But Tana Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, but Tana Mishum Rabbi Akiva, but they quoted Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva saying, Kol Yisrael ruyin lo ta'itzla. You can't make them take it. So this was all to prove that it can't be the Rashbag holds, we make you sell it and give you something less because everyone's deserving of whatever they have. They all deserve to be treated as a king, and therefore, you get to keep it. And therefore, if Rashbag is saying sell it, he must mean you sell it completely. There's no such thing as swapping it for something else. So now, basically, we have Rav Nachman who says, Rashbag clearly thinks there's no Mesidrina. Now, the only way to explain that is the following, and this we'll kind of finalize with, which is, and this I started with when we got to Rashbag in the Mishna, so you'd understand it now. The first 30 days, it's a mashkon. You have to leave them with basics. But once the 30 days are over, it leaves the world of mashkon. So all that is irrelevant. And according to Rashbag, there's no misadrin at that point. You basically sell it and you get your money. And the person's left with nothing because it leaves the world of collateral, goes into the world of collection. And now it's yours. Okay, last thing for today. Now we're just going back to what we suggested before. When we suggested that maybe Rashbag meant sell it and give something less in exchange, I could get a pillow and a blanket. There's different qualities. So you can sell an expensive one and buy a cheap one and leave them with the cheap one. But we were giving those examples in the Mishna of a machresha. Plowshare, there is only one. Okay, it's not like in Amazon, right? You could buy like different valued items of the same exact thing. No, there's one value for a plowshare. There's one type of plowshare. That's it. Okay, so there is no exchanging it. What are you going to do without your plowshare? So I'm a Rabba Machresha de Kaspa. No, sometimes someone could have like a fancy silver one. Okay, there are fancier ones, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, with that, we finished this section, although we didn't finish it fully. We're going to still question a little bit more. We're going to basically say, I don't get this whole idea. Why is the Malva responsible to make sure the Lova has what to eat? Why can't he just say this isn't my problem? So we'll get to that tomorrow. Okay, it's late. We'll do a very quick review. We started with the issue of, finished up the issue with the payments and in what cases is the Balabai believe, which cases is the worker believe. And then we went to the mashkon, this issue of a mashkon that's coming in payment for a loan. And the basic two sugya we dealt with was Shmuel about, is the Beit Din allowed to go into the house or not? Shmuel thought no. Other people thought yes. We brought three difficulties, resolved them. Although the last one we resolved by saying it's actually machloket tanaim. And then we moved to this topic of what they have to leave them with something. And then Rav Nachman said, but Rashbag doesn't seem to really say that. And the truth is Rashbag doesn't say it, certainly after the 30 days are over. Perhaps the first 30 days, yes, but after the first 30 days, because it leaves the realm of mashkon, goes into this other world, and therefore it's not relevant. Okay, with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day. Don't forget to register for the Siyum. And when Alana Shiur goes up in Din and Daf, I recommend listening. Have a good day.